Gracias. Dear organizers of this gathering, distinguished participants, and my fellow colleagues. Buenos dias from St. Petersburg, Florida. It's a pleasure to be here today with you for the Global Disinformation Summit, along with distinguished journalists, fact-checkers, researchers, and information quality experts in LATAM. I would like to talk to you a little bit about what we do at the IFCN and provide you feedback, context to tell you what we try to do to address the global misinformation problem we have. Founded back in late 2015, the International Fact-Checking Network has been advocating for higher standards among the global fact-checking community. To fulfill that purpose, a code of principles for fact-checkers has been developed and introduced to the community in 2016. Code of Principles was immediately signed up by 35 organizations from 27 different countries after its launch in 2016. I'm very happy to be in this conference today with a keynote speech to be followed by wonderful colleagues like Laura Zammer and Christina Tardagula, who were among the first signatories of that code back in 2016. In 2016, Facebook announced that they will rely on their third-party fact-checking program for becoming an IFCN verified signatory. That became a possibility after an open letter to Mark Zuckerberg was signed by the community addressing the need for fight against misinformation. In January 2015, a new system of independent and external assessors reviewing the compliance of the code and setting up an advisory board to decide whether the applicants qualify to become a verified signatory or not. A year after the launch, we have streamlined the application process and immediately reached to more than 60 applications a year for IFCN's Code of Principles. The IFCN currently has a pool of 185 assessors from 94 different countries. International Fact-Checking Network puts a strong emphasis on the expertise, geographical coverage, and impartiality of its pool of external independent assessors. We organize webinars for the assessors throughout the year to disseminate the know-how and experience essential for assessments. We provide guidelines for the assessors and the applicants to make sure the applications fulfill the responsibilities attached to transparency and accountability. Leverage the increasing pool of our independent and external assessors, we have reached to 104 organizations from 57 different countries to our IFCN's Code of Principles. In our network, we have organizations ranging from big beasts of traditional media, such as Le Monde Le Decodeur in France and the Washington Post in the US, to global news wires such as AFP, AP, DPA, and Reuters, to nonprofit organizations like Africa Check from South Africa, Full Fact from the United Kingdom, Chequado of Argentina, and startups such as Agencia Lupa in Brazil, PolitiFact in the US, and Rappler in the Philippines. As the list of signatures have grown, so has the diversity of news and political environments in which they work as well. Some operate in what are effectively one-party states and others in multi-party democratic systems. As we speak, we also actively engage with new organizations in different parts of the world through established organizations such as Chequada and others in LATAM to support the fact-checking ecosystem in the continent. For some, official information is easy to get and generally judged reliable. For many more, the reverse is the truth. To ensure the changes in our Code of Principles, we reach out to fact-checkers and industry experts around the world over 6 months in 2019 to adjust the code with new changes to make sure we can have a much more rigorous system. Everybody can assume that they do fact-checking, but when it comes to the difference between real fact-checkers and fake fact-checkers, we always have to be careful. The new code we have since 2020 now rules on who can be a signatory. It bans state-controlled media. It demands the signatories are focused primarily on public interest issues, and we require a longer testing period. Second, Given that in the most countries, it's rare for every political party to generate the same number of fact-checkable claims. Now, the verified signatures must prove that they select what to fact-check based on primarily on the reach and importance of the claims themselves. They don't have to reach or aim for a false balance, but they need to make sure that they are fair, objective, and also independent in their selection of the claims that they fact check. And we have also introduced new standards for sourcing and methodology that range from quality of sources to rigor in how claims are tested. These standards ensure greater fairness and accuracy for fact-checking organizations. Fourth, the parent media companies, they want a fact-checking unit. Now they can be a verified signatory once they follow an honest and open corrections policy themselves as well. This ensures that the parent companies that the fact-checking organizations operate under, they also work in concert, in harmony with the signature in disseminating accurate information. Fifth, we are working with the independent assessors to introduce a randomized sample of the fact checks produced and have almost tripled to the number of criteria we seek in every application. In the last couple of years, not only has the global fact-checking community grown, but the horizons of the practice of fact-checking have grown as well. Today, compared to the mid-2010s, fact-checkers specialize and provide professional services in a variety of areas to some of the largest technology platforms. Google, Facebook, Line, TikTok, WhatsApp, and YouTube are among the platforms that feature fact checks on their various products and services in different capacities. They range from just surfacing fact checks to users to working with fact checkers in commercial capacities to add additional signals to their content moderation practices. We see and happily notice that more and more organizations are now working with big tech companies such as Facebook per se, but we are also trying our best to make sure that the fact-checking organizations, especially in our network, have more diverse revenue streams so they don't necessarily just rely on the money they get from internet companies. Fact-checking is growing, but it's also evolving. The latest census by Duke Reporters Lab identified 341 active fact-checking projects, up from 51 from last June's report. According to the same survey, 35 of those fact-checking projects are based in LATAM, making the continent is among the two fastest growing regions for fact-checking organizations. But after years of steady and sometimes rapid growth, there are signs that the trend is slowing. Even though misleading content and political lies have played a growing role in contentious elections and the global response around the world. A global response to the coronavirus pandemic around the world. Slightly more than a year ago, the world was shaken with the news of the novel coronavirus spreading around the world, followed by the first infodemic as described by the United Nations. The role of misinformation in the deadly impact of COVID-19 has been noted by observers, academics, and practitioners such as fact-checkers. And we, as a community, are dealing with countless of baseless claims and conspiracy theories that are making people around the world more vulnerable to the disease and more resistant to the safe vaccines that are available to the people. A study published in the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene estimated that about 5,800 people were admitted to hospitals as a result of false information on social media, just in the United Kingdom. The response to misinformation around COVID-19 has been far from being perfect. However, now the consensus that we have, at least on the need to tackle the issue with a multidisciplinary approach, has set a new standard for collaboration between public institutions, technology platforms, fact-checkers, and broader industry experts. We all seek and offer authoritative and reliable information over bad information. Recent studies, such as the Reuters Institute's one, found that the number of at least the English language fact checks rose by 900% just from January to March 2020. And in order to demonstrate the impact of fact checking, we need more empirical evidence to demonstrate how fact checks travel across different platforms and address misinformation on the internet scale. Technology companies have been under stronger scrutiny to address the impact of their business models on the amplification of misinformation to its highest level ever. Critics of big technology point out that shortcomings of platforms significantly different from the previous focus on the very also the legitimate concerns about privacy and data protection. We now all care about how platforms amplify information and what are the measures out there to help people to get accurate information. International governmental organizations such as the United Nations are now teaming up with fact checkers around the world to provide the most vulnerable people with accurate and digestible information. Politicians around the world are also under stronger focus for their lack of commitment to factual and scientifically backed information on the importance of social distancing, face coverings, and vaccinations to win this battle against the pandemic. I can hear you asking, are these enough? It's absolutely far from being enough. Conspiracy theories still travel faster than reliable information. Vaccine hesitancy and even resistance still poses a strong risk against community despite promising but yet isolated evidence of shift on that front. And it's being fueled by disinformation circulating in closed groups, messaging apps, and social media at large. Fact-checking scalability has always been a main concern for fact-checkers across the board, and the lack of globally and consistently applied policies to tackle top-to-bottom misinformation on platforms still outweigh the important work that we do on those fronts. Governments around the world are using misinformation as an opportunity to control the flow of information and the public discourse at the expense of practices signaling censorship. More and more examples of government-controlled fact-checking operations, they compose a threat to the credibility to nonpartisan and independent fact-checking organizations from Manila to Rio de Janeiro, from Johannesburg to Oslo. Even in Europe, bad actors have weaponized fact-checking to deceive constituencies and marginalize dissidents that challenge dominant narratives. I come from a political fact-checking background. Between 2014 and 2019, fact-checking organization that I launched and managed has fact-checked 2 presidential elections, 3 parliamentary elections, and 1 local elections. In Turkey, before 2019, I was numerous times asked what was our goal, whether it was to change people's decisions before elections or provide them accurate information. We were fortunate enough at the time to be well connected with the international fact-checking community, so we always had the right answer. Fact-checking is not about changing people's decisions, because we are committed to nonpartisanship and we are delivering fact checks to counter false information. Our job as fact checkers is to help people to be better informed about the issues that they are concerned about and provide them the skills to make their own decisions. However, those elections enabled us eventually the fact checking as a practice to become a household name in the country and now is in the world as well. Similar to roughly half of the fact-checking organizations in the IFCN network, the nonprofit nature of my former organization was instrumental in communicating fact-checking as a public interest journalism, as an antidote to the polarized discourse fueled by politically charged disinformation. Fact-checking today is at the intersection of accountability journalism and technology. It serves the public through a multifaceted publishing. We rate statements of politicians. Sometimes we notarize the authenticity of all sorts of multimedia, and we put our credibility at stake while we do both. Health institutions and intergovernmental organizations have turned their eyes into fact checkers to seek help in communicating factual information. People are vulnerable to misinformation. Authoritative and accurate information has become essential to address vaccine hesitancy and conspiracy theories, which target people's health and our collective sense of society. There's a golden opportunity in front of us as the advocates of accurate public discourse, since we have more reasons to be cautiously optimistic for the future. The understanding that misinformation can cause real-life harm has been established, and no credible objection has been raised against that. The acknowledgement of fact-checking as a public service is clearly represented in the increase of partnerships between fact-checkers and industry stakeholders, which are now at record high. Technology around structured data provides new opportunities for fact-checkers to create sustainable business models to keep providing this public interest service in the years and decades ahead. As we transform into growing the professional cohort of fact-checking organizations, our responsibility is to help the community to be stronger and more sustainable. As the director of the International Fact-Checking Network, I thank you for organizing this gathering this week to bring wonderful minds to these topics and surface bright ideas to tackle those challenges. I recognize that we cannot win all the battles at once, but one by one, gathering together and making sure fact-checking, accurate information, and the acceptance of good quality over bad quality will make our lives easier as journalists, but also better to reach to a better structure around a better internet, safer information ecosystems, and healthy discourses for the people that we live in our societies. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Baybars, y muchas gracias por la generosidad de tu tiempo para poder contarnos un poco de esto y sobre todo el tema de las barreras y los desafíos. Quiero hacerte 2 o 3 preguntas en ping-pong o tennis table, un poco rápidas. Primero, ¿qué impacto creen ustedes que estos 300 y pico grupos de fact-checking han tenido en la población o el consumo de noticias verificadas, cuando por otro lado sabemos bien que a veces chocamos contra los algoritmos de las redes sociales que nos hacen leer material totalmente polarizado, prácticamente con los gustos o porque nosotros hemos puesto likes, likes y likes? Y por otro lado, si la verificación de datos también va, cuando hablabas de temas electorales, va hacia los anuncios electorales, no solamente al discurso electoral.
Well, so it is no secret that lies travel faster than the truth. I mean, we probably have, in all of our languages, have a relevant saying for that. It is very, known for us that people are more likely to engage with heated conversations. They are more eager to engage with polarized information over our fact checks. That's true. But on the other hand, more and more organizations, especially since the pandemic, are investing more on their pre-bunking skills. So what we see now is fact-checking organizations partnering with related institutes around health, different parts of their expertise areas, provide accurate information in packages, in small bits, in different formats like videos, podcasts, and they don't only counter misinformation reactively, they also engage with those topics more proactively. One of the studies that factcheck.org in the US, a part of the University of Pennsylvania, shows us that the readers are more responsive to fact checks or the presentation of fact checks under certain topics. So readers find it easier when they go to a fact-checking organization's website to see the most recent fact checks on a particular topic, whether it's about election security, whether it's about the coronavirus. they like to see a context behind a fact check, to see the reasoning behind why those fact checks are published at first place and what they are trying to address on a larger scale. Many falsehoods that we see around the internet, especially, for example, let me give an example, the coronavirus, they constitute around certain themes: the spread of the disease, the origins of the disease, the impact of the disease, the symptoms of the disease, and then the vaccine safety. So you see all those claims, false claims, circulating around certain narratives. And the more you pre-bunk those pieces of misinformation and provide your readers with more context, it serves better, as the studies have shown. When it comes to the question about the number of fact-checking organizations around the world, whether they make an impact, it's hard to measure. It's really hard to measure the impact of fact-checking as we, presently. It is more scientifically possible to look at certain periods of times, for example, election periods or crises like we have right now, and in a pandemic, and see how fact checks have performed over shaping the public discourse. Some organizations, for example, use certain metrics to measure the impact of their fact checks. Full Fact, for example, from the United Kingdom, do use the number of corrections that they gather from their MPs, their ministers, to measure the impact of fact-checking, and they annually publish those numbers to show how good work they are, how good of a work they are doing. Chequado from Argentina, who my dear colleague and friend Laura will be talking very shortly in a panel, has done an amazing job very lately to make a big difference in a legal investigation. And their fact check has become a big part of that investigation, which I think was one of the largest, biggest examples of impact of fact checking in 2021. Agência Lupa in Brazil do a lot of local outreach in Brazil to make sure they reach out to new audiences. Not everyone goes to a fact-checking organization's website. So as a fact-checking organization, you need to be more active, you need to be out there. And what they do with local influencers, with radio stations, show that fact-checking is not what it used to be. It used to be you publish your fact-check and then you wait for it. And then people will hopefully, check out your website. But now it's more complicated than that. You have to go out there and make a difference. So we'll see in a period of time when we have the data to see how fact checks have performed during these periods. The elections that Argentina had very recently, the Brazilian elections will be next year. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for researchers to study the impact of fact checking in these settings.